All right, I will say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin a good tavach. Such a zechus, Baruch Hashem, to be able to begin another week of learning Bava Basra together. Begin by thanking all of our sponsors, our TALMUD Torah sponsors for the month of Tavshin Pei, the Tilson Family of Am Yisroel, for dedicating all of the Shumer and Joshos this year as a zechus for besuros tovos for all of Am Yisroel. Our TALMUD Torah sponsors for the month of Cheshvan, the families who dedicated all of the Shumer and Joshos for the month. Steve and Teri Czinn in honor of the birth of their 6th grandchild, Devorah Eliana Czinn, and in loving memory of Dr. Zinn's father, Bunim Tzvi Ben Chaim, Shmuel Robyn Korobkin, besuros refuah sheleima for Rabin's cousin serving in the IDF, Benyamin Chaim Pesach ben Musha Chana, and creation of the Yahrzeit of Rabin's mother, Pesa Mira Bas Chaim, Dr. Moshe and Ellen Gavant, in memory of Dr. Gavant's parents, Yakov, Meir ben Moshe Leib, and Sheina Bas Abba, Dr. Behzad and Yemina Soufer of Los Angeles, in the merit of a speedy and complete refuah for Esther Bracha Bas Chaya. We hope that in the merit of our TALMUD Torah, all of the Neshama Slavin Aliyah, the families in the Chama, all of those who need a refuah should have one together. Kol Cholei Yisrael, Kadosh Baruch Hu, the Meir Hashem, speedily return our hostages back to their family, to their people, to their land, and may our holy soldiers be successful. B'chol ma'aseh yedehem. With that, let us begin. We have a lot to do. Really, it's always nice, like when you start every. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, it wasn't on my WhatsApp. I'm sorry. Sammy Malka Esther Bracha, in commemoration of the Yahrzeit of Rabbi Shlomo Carlbach, Rabbi Shlomo Ben Arav Naftali, zechus Lebracha. We all know that Rabbi Shlomo had such a profound impact, has a profound impact on our lives. Probably one of those people, besides, who just has a daily impact in ways that we often don't even know. Whether it's the niggin that you're humming that you don't even realize is a Carlbach niggin, to lifting up every single Shabbos, to lifting up every single Yom Tiv, and to mamish reigniting the connection between a Yid and his neshama for many generations. Halavai Shav should be a Meir for all of Klal Yisrael. Should be Zilcha Meir Hashem to sing his nigunim in the Beis Hamikdash and hear Rabbi Aminu. Amen. Sammy, I apologize. Sorry about that. We're good? We're good? Okay, good. Thank you for the sponsorship. And also with that, let us begin. A really beautiful daf ahead of us today. So today's daf is Kuf Mem Hey 145. We are picking up on Kuf Mem Hey 5 lines down. 4 lines down. Lema. So remember again, we're talking about the interesting discussion over here about let's say Reuven and Rachel. And and a Mazel Tov to Larry Franks on the birth of a granddaughter to his children in Chicago. Mazel Tov. By the way, this was a good week for granddaughters. We just had the Gemara Bas Tchila Simin Yafa Lebanim. Larry, I just gave you your Devorah Torah for the Kiddush and Yahrzeit Hashem. Bas Tchila Simin Yafa Lebanim. So this is the week of the girls. Baruch Hashem. Okay, so with that, let us Yahrzeit Hashem to see her parents be Megadol Torah L'Chopah L'Maisim Tovim. Yahrzeit Hashem blossom into an incredible Bas Yisrael. May have Esrim Shanim Tovos. Well, with that, let us begin. Lema Tunu Li Baili Ve'esmach Bo Tunahi. So we were dealing with a very interesting case in yesterday's daf regarding the following concept. So Reuven was Makadesh Rachel. Okay, so he gives her Kesef Kiddushin, whatever the Kesef Kiddushin is, and now Reuven goes ahead and dies, or for that matter, again, decides to get divorced. So remember again, I will say, 2 parts to marriage, Erisin and Nisuin. So again, the couple only lives together after Nisuin. So Erisin accomplished by giving the woman an item of value. Nisuin is accomplished by the chuppah. By chuppah. We saw in Ksuv is chuppah, ose Nisuin. What's chuppah? Okay, so that's a machlokes. But again, chuppah affects Nisuin. If a couple does Erisin and then decides not to go ahead and continue with the marriage, either husband dies, or Reuven decides he doesn't want to marry her anymore. So the halach is you can't simply walk away from Kiddushin, you have to dissolve it with a get. The shayla that we're dealing with over here is what happens to the Kesef Kiddushin. Is a woman obligated to give back her Kesef Kiddushin in the event that the marriage does not progress from Erisin to Nisuin? So the expression that the Gemara used in yesterday's daf is, well, maybe it depends. But in a case where Reuven dies, Rachel should not have to go ahead and give back the Kesef Kiddushin. Why? What could Rachel say? Give me my chassan. Give me a chassan under the chuppah and I'm ready to go. In other words, I'm not the problem. It's the dead guy who's the problem. In other words, she'll say a little bit nicer than that, but you understand. In other words, that she's saying, I'm ready to go, right? I'm fine going forward. So again, the problem, of course, is with the chassan. He's not here. So why should I have to give back the Kesef Kiddushin? So the Gemara picks up on that. So the Gemara says, Lema, Tunuli Baili Ve'esmach Imo, give me my husband and I will rejoice with him. Tanahi, here we go. This time, both say, here it is. If a man does Erusin with besuros, remember again, Erusin, first stage marriage. How is that accomplished? Item of value. Again, it's first Mishnah in Kiddushin. Right, kesef shtar bia. So again, assuming we'll just operate with it, we're dealing here with kesef, right? So Reuven gives Rachel money. He gives her money or a ring, an item of value. So hamaares hasaisha, so besula govim asayim va'amon amon. I suppose there's a lot over here. So Reuven does erusin with Rachel. So now what happens? We'll say. So now let's say again, Reuven decides he doesn't want to marry Rachel anymore. So he divorces her, or Reuven dies. What's the halacha? She's entitled to a ksuva after erusin. So now what you're thinking to yourself, really? We learned ksuvas. I don't remember ksuva obligation being generated after kiddushin, after erusin. So look at the Rashbam for just a moment. This is very interesting. Besula gav masayim emes o girsha ubidikasav la min ha-erusin. We're talking about over here a case Rashbam says where Reuven went out of his way to obligate himself in ksuva after erusin. The Gemara says, "Delo kasav." I'm sorry, mina erusin. Dehecha delo kasav la ba'i biksuva selo ifshita. So we'll say there is a machlokes, an overarching machlokes, as to when does the ksuva obligation begin. Does it begin after erusin, or does it only begin after nisuin? So the way the Rashbam sets up this case is we're talking about a case over here where Reuven willingly obligates himself in ksuva after erusin. Okay, so now we know the case. So Reuven says to Rachel, gives her a ring. He gives it to her. He says also to her, I'm hereby obligating myself in ksuva from this moment going forward. Now, if Reuven either dies or they decide to get divorced, because remember again, should Reuven or Rachel decide that they don't want to progress into nisuin, you have to dissolve the union with a get. So whether there's a get or there's death, Rachel is entitled to her ksuva. How much is her ksuva? It depends on her status. If she's a besula, 200 zos, and if she's an almana, or almana's lav davka almana, any case of a second marriage, ultimately again she gets almana. So she gets her ksuva. Okay, here we go. So that's not a chiddush so far. Makom shenago lahachzer kiddushin machzirin. Makom shenago shlo lahachzer kiddushin ein machzir derbi nasan. Oh, okay. So we'll say. By the way, I just want to point out this is a very important halacha l'maisa shayla. So now let's say again. So the marriage, the Reuven dies, or they end up getting divorced. So she's going to get her ksuva. So what's the shayla? So now, does she have to return the ring? It turns out that they did not go ahead and do nisuin. The ring is the kiddushin. Does she have to give back the ring? Does she have to give back the ring of kiddushin or not, or the kesef kiddushin or not? So again, Rabbi Nassan says it's all dependent on minhag hamakom. It's minhag hamakom, local custom. So if local custom is to return it, she should return it. And if local custom is that she keeps it, then she keeps it. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda will say, by the way, I just want to give you coming attractions. This should not be confused with other wedding gifts. We're going to deal with wedding gifts separately, right? Let's say Reuven gave Rachel a bracelet. He gave her a necklace. He gave her all other gifts. That's separate. Right now we're focusing on over here the actual item used for kiddushin. When the marriage is dissolved, either through death or divorce, Rachel's going to get her ksuba. Does she keep or does she have to give back the item of kiddushin? So first to be Rabbi Nassan, minhag hamakom. Rabbi Yehuda says, Be'emes amru, makom shenagu lahachzir machzirin. Rabbi Yehuda says, in reality, we say, in a place where the custom is to return the item of kiddushin, we return it, and where the custom is not to return it, we don't return it. I don't understand. Didn't he just say something as Rabbi Nassan? Rabbi Yehuda hanasi hanu tanakama. Rabbi Yehuda literally just parroted what Rabbi Nassan said. Elalav, we'll say first wide line. Elalav tinuli baili ve'esmach ika beinahu. Oh, no, there is a point of contention between Rabbi Yehuda hanasi and Rabbi Nassan. And what's the point of contention? Not the case of divorce, but the case of death. Where Reuven dies, does Rachel have the ability to claim, I'm not giving back the kesef kiddushin. Why should I have to give it back? I'm ready to get married. give me a husband, right? Give me Ruvain, and let's go. So the Gemara says, watch this. The Bryce is missing a piece, and here's you have to read it. Second wide line above. So here we go. Get ready. Hama'ari says, Isha, if Ruvain does erisin with Rachel, so again, remember he gives her a ring, he says, Moshe Yisrael, and now again, filling in the lines of the Rashbam over here, and what happens? And he commits himself to Ksuva immediately after erisin, so now the marriage is dissolved. So Besula gove masayim va'amona mona. So Besula gets a 200 zuz ksuva, and an amona gets 100 zuz. So Gemara says, 1 second. When is this so? The hadar be'ihu. When Ruvain is the one ultimately again who does not want to continue in the marriage. Look at the Rashbam. The Rashbam is almost right across on the right. The hadar be'ihu chozer ba v'rotza legarsha. Hilchach titel ksuvasa milvad kiddushin v'adin imesu kid mefarsh azal mishum demi baile lefarushe ba'anpenash. So we'll say the idea of it is, so when do we say that Rachel gets her ksuva? That's when the marriage doesn't progress because of Ruvain. Either because Ruvain divorces her, or Ruvain dies. But again, what happens if Rachel dies? What happens, right? Rachel dies, that's why the marriage doesn't progress. Then, what is supposed to say, now what's the shayla? Does Ruvain have to pay her ksuva? Right? Rachel died, does he have to pay her ksuva to her heirs? Aval misa, makum shnagu lahachzer machzirin, makum shnagu shlo lahachzer ein machzirin. So but if she dies, then halacha l'maisa, the Gemara says like this. If she dies, then in terms of the returning of the kesef kiddushin, everything depends on the minhag makom. Right? So again, it sounds like it's a davar pashut that if she dies, he doesn't have to pay her ksuva. Right? In other words, the ksuva entitlement is dafka to her. If he dies, he doesn't have to pay her ksuva. What about kesef kiddushin? If she dies, does kesef kiddushin come back? So it depends. Minhag makom. So the Gemara says, however, bedafka shemesehi. This is only assuming that she died. Ava meishu ein machzir. What can you infer from her? The only question about minhag makom is when Rachel dies. So then again, minhag makom dictates whether or not her family or her heirs have to return the kesef kiddushin. However, again, if he died, Ruvain died, ein machzirin. She is not obligated to return the kesef kiddushin. My time, what's the reason? Yichol isha tomar tenuli baili ve'esmachimo. Because she could say, give me a husband. In other words, we'll say, so it's a strange phrase. So she says, like, give me a husband, I'll rejoice with him, which is just another way of saying, I am not the problem here. I'm not the problem here. See, some marriages, the assignment of blame continues even after death, right? In other words, I'm not the problem here, right? I'm not the problem. It's not my fault, right? You're the problem. Right? So Lamaisa, she could claim over here that I'm ready to get married. Give me my husband, give me Ruvain, and let's go. So that's her way of saying that I should not have to go ahead and give back the kesef kiddushin. Okay? So we'll say, so therefore, that's the opinion of Rabbi Nassim. Right, so Rabbi Nassim will say that halacha l'maisa again. The only issue over here, the only time that it's dependent on minhag makom is if she died. Right, so Rachel died, then is Rachel's family obligated to give back to Ruvain the kesef kiddushin? Rabbi Nassim says that's based on minhag makom. But if he died, it appears that halacha l'maisa again, she has every right to say, I'm not giving back anything. Give me my husband, I'm ready to get married. The problem's not on my end. Because it's not on my end, therefore Allah says, I have no obligation to give back the kesef kiddushin. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi Meir, and Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi comes along and says, think about it, how intimidating must it be to be on the other side of the argument of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi? Like, right, give me anyone else, just not Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. Okay, it's almost like Chagaja. V'asa HaKadosh Baruch Hu b'shachat hamalach hamaves. V'asa Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi l'meimar. Be'emes amru, so he says, in reality, what does it say? Bein mesu, bein mesehi. Rabbi Yehuda says the truth is, it doesn't matter who dies. Whether it's Ruvain or it's Rachel. Makum shenagu lahachzir machzirin. Makum shenagu shelo lahachzir ein machzirin. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi is of the opinion that this whole thing is based on minhag makom. That's all. This is a transaction. And so whether or not, in the event that the marriage does not progress from erisin to nisuin, because of whatever the reason is, he dies, she dies, Halacha l'maisa, it is all based on minhag makom. V'lo matzah, Gemara says, b'meisi makom shnagu l'hachzir machzirin, makom shnagu shol l'hachzir in machzirin. V'lo matzia amra tnu li baili ve'esmach imo. And she cannot make a claim of, I'm not giving you back the kesef kiddushin, because I didn't cause the problem over here. After all, give me my husband and I will rejoice with him. So the Gemara wants to suggest over here that this is the point of contention between Rabbi Nassan and Rabbi Huda Hanasi. That whether or not, in the case of where Ruvain dies, can she claim, give me my husband and I'll rejoice with him. And therefore, if you can't furnish him, I'm not giving back the money. Rabbi Nassan seems to subscribe to that. Rabbi Huda Hanasi says, no, it's always minhag hamakom. Tush Gemara says, rejects it. No. D'chuli alma, yichola shetomar tnuli baili ve'esmach imo. So I will say, in reality, everyone agrees that in the case of where Ruvain dies, Rachel should not have to give back the kesef kiddushin. Why not? Because she could claim, give me my husband, and I'll marry him. So in other words, not my fault. I'm not the problem over here. Therefore, I'm not giving the kesef kiddushin. So what's the shaila? So the Gemara says, I'm sorry. Lo d'chuli alma yichola shetomar tnuli baili ve'esmach bo v'demeis hu kuli alma lo pligi. And therefore, again, in the case where Ruvain died, and therefore that's the reason why Erusin does not progress into Nisuin. Everyone agrees that Rachel does not have to give back the Kesef Kiddushin. Why? Because she has a bona fide halachic claim to say, give me my husband and I'll get married. In other words, I'm ready to go. It's your problem, and therefore I'm not giving it back. Where's the machlokes? Here we go. Ki pligi shemesihi. So we'll say this is fascinating. The machlokes case is where she dies. Rachel dies. So meaning what? We'll say, so now when Rachel dies, is Rachel's family or Rachel's heirs, are they obligated to give back the Kesef Kiddushin to Ruvain? So we'll say, now watch this. V'hacha, this is fascinating. V'hacha, B'kiddushin l'tibuin nitnu kamiflagi. So I will say, so what's the shaila over here? So we'll say, this is fascinating. And by the way, we're going to find the origination of a fascinating term. I will say, what does kiddushin l'tibuin mean? Tava means to sink. What's the shaila? Is kesef kiddushin considered to be a sunk cost? So here's where it came from. That phrase. What's a sunk cost? A sunk cost is an irretrievable cost. You cannot get it back. So I'll say, this is fascinating. Do we consider kesef kiddushin to be a sunk cost? Sunk cost, in other words, this is, so to speak, the price of doing business, right? This is the cost of doing business. You want to get married? So this kesef kiddushin, understand that is a non-refundable deposit, right? So in other words, you're not getting that. You're not getting that back. It's a sunk cost. Look at the Rashman for just a moment. L'tibur nitnu shim tamos v'lo yiske. I know non-refundable deposit is a very unromantic way of calling it, right? Or, can you imagine this under the chuppah? Are you ready now to receive your non-refundable deposit to affect your erusin, right? This is the any event, but okay, halachic. So the Gemara says, look at the Rashbam. Actually, Rashbam is right across on the right. Also, l'tibur nitnu shem tamos v'lo yiska l'sa'ena yu avudim v'lo yaksuru lo. So we'll say, so now the Gemara is asking, this is a yisodisdik kasha on the fundamental halachic definition of kesef kiddushin. We understand what kesef kiddushin does. It affects the transactional part of marriage. Man gives woman item of value. Woman accepts item of value, and through that acceptance enters into this marital union, or at least the first stage of this marital union. The shaila is, what's the status of the money? Is the money considered to be a sunk cost, or is it a retrievable cost? So the Gemara says, here we go. Rabbi Nassan says, Kiddushin lav l'tibuin nitnu. Rabbi Nassan says, Kesef Kiddushin is not a sunk cost. So because it's not a sunk cost, therefore again, under certain circumstances, if the marriage does not progress from erusin to nisuin, the money is absolutely retrievable. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, halacha l'maisa, Kesef Kiddushin, sunk cost. Sunk cost, irretrievable cost, you can't get it back. And again, in that matter, I will say, it doesn't really, it sounds like it shouldn't even matter what, who died, or what the local custom is. It makes no difference. It makes no difference. Once you pay that money, that is a non-refundable deposit on the rest of your life. So the Gemara says as follows, here's the problem. But that's not what the Brisa said, right? The Brisa did hinge this, did hinge Kiddushin refund on local custom. So how do you reconcile this? Hachikamar. Okay, so we'll say, so here we go. So we'll say, so now I just want to point out, what it sounds like over here right now is this whole discussion by Kiddushin has to do with one fundamental issue. Is Kesef Kiddushin considered to be non-refundable deposit or not? Is it a sunk cost or not? Okay, so now, we can kind of move this over to the side. There's that machlokes. We'll see, actually. We'll get to that halacha l'maisa about what it is. But what do you do about the fact that the Brisa made it sound like it's based on minhag hamakom? Oh, that was talking about something else. What's the something else? The Gemara says, V'ha makom shelagu las mazir katani, haki kamar, v'sivlonos. Oh, what's sivlonos? Marriage gifts. Marriage gifts, right? A chassan gives a kala many other gifts, right? Or even a kala gives a chassan many other gifts. What happens to those gifts in the event that the marriage doesn't actualize? Right? In other words, they did erisin. So you want to say, it's interesting, remember, these shilas there's not really a shilas so much after divorce, after nisuin, because after a couple is married, there is a more formalized mechanism for division of property, right? And for what you do after that. The shaila is over here where there was erisin, but there wasn't nisuin. So now the marriage never fully progressed. So now again, what do you do with the gifts that were received? V'sivlonos. So what do you do with gifts? So vandai makom shnago lahachzir machzirin. So ultimately, I will say that is based on minhag hamakom. So interestingly enough, whether or not kesef kiddushin is returned, that's a fundamental machlokes about the nature of kesef kiddushin. Is it a sunk cost or not? When it comes to gifts, do you return gifts if erisin happened but nisuin didn't happen? So that halacha l'maisa again is based on minhag hamakom. So the Gemara says, Vahani Tanoi, if you take a look at, let's see, Vahani Tanoi, before we get to the Rashbam over here. Vahani Tanoi, Kahani Tanoi, Desanya, here we go. Kid Shabikikar. So let's now listen to this. Let's say Reuven was Mekadesh Rachel with the Kikar. Now, a Kikar, Bosai, is 2,500 zuz. That's a big kiddushin. That's a big kiddushin. So the guys are kikar. So what's the halacha? So we'll say, and now halacha l'maisa again. They do erisin, but it never comes to nisuin. Never comes to nisuin. So what's the halacha? So Reuben, let's say he's divorcing her. So besula gova masai va'amana mana divrei Rabbi Meir. So we'll say, so again. So Rabbi Meir says we must be talking about a case over here again where halacha l'maisa he committed himself to ksuba. So therefore again, if she's a besula 200 zuz. And ultimately, again, Na'amana 100 zuz. Now look at the Rashbam for just a moment. The Rashbam says over here, he says like this, Besula Gova Masayim. It's actually, if you go across to the right in the Rashbam, about 8 lines down. Besula Gova Masayim zuz, Dahainu Shnei Manin, Vahainu Chamishim Shekel, Kemar HaBesuros, Milvad Kiddushin Titol Ksuvasa. So I'll say, so now, interestingly enough, right, so what's interesting over here is Rabbi Meir seems to say, in addition to her keeping the kesef kiddushin, she also gets a ksuva. In other words, not only does she keep the kikar, not only does she keep the 2,500 zuz, right, but she also gets her ksuva. All right. Rabbi Yehuda says, "Besula gava masayim va'amana mana umachzeres las hashar." Rabbi Yehuda holds that halacha l'maisa no, she gets her ksuva, but she gives back everything else. She gives back everything else. Now, we'll say, now, what does that mean? So, the Maisa, again, according to that approach, she gets her. So, what doesn't she get? Kesef Kiddushin. Right? The Rashbam says over here, Rabbi Yehuda Besula Gova Masayim, Mina Kikar Shel Kiddushin, Umachzeres Hashar La Orsa. Or La Arusa, sorry. So, again, I both say, so, by the way, I just want to point out over here, so now, this is interesting, machlokes over here. So, Rabbi Meir holds, she keeps Kesef Kiddushin, sunk cost, and also gets her ksuva. Rabbi Yehuda says she gets ksuva, but has to return kesef kiddushin. So obviously, the way the Gemara is also phrasing it over here is because she got so much money for kesef kiddushin. Obviously, what could she do in this case? So according to Rabbi Meir, she keeps kesef kiddushin plus is entitled to another payment. According to Rabbi Yehuda, she could subtract out kesef kiddushin, she could subtract out ksuva and return the rest. Third opinion, Rabbi Yossi Omer, kidsha. Be'esrim, no sin lo shloshim chatzoin. Kidsha b'shloshim, no sin lo esrim chatzoin. So we'll say, so now, interestingly enough, So here you have over here, so Rabbi Yossi says like this, he gives Makadisher with 20 shekel, so he gives her 30 halves. We'll see what this means in just a moment. He was here with Makadisher with 30 shekel, then he gives her back 20 halves. We'll see what that means in just a moment. So the Gemara says, Ma'askina, first of all, what's the case here? Right, what's the case? Here's what we know. We know that Reuven did Erisin with Rachel and gave her a lot of money for Erisin. What happened that now it's not progressing to Nisuin? What occurred over? Because we also remember again, the event which prevents the Erisin from going into Nisuin is obviously very important for how we decide what the result of the case is. So Gemara says, "B'may askinon, ilema shemesa." If she died, if Rachel died, mi is leksuva. So I say, so this is very interesting. That, under normal circumstances, say in a normal marriage, right, where there was Erisin, Nisuin, a wife dies, Rachel dies, what happens to her ksuva? So let's remember again, that's ksuvas benim dichrin. That's one of the Tanai ksuva, that a woman's sons inherit her ksuva. So here's what's interesting. From Erisin, if a man pledges a ksuva from Erisin, it is understood that the only person he's promising that ksuva to is who? To his wife, to his arusa. It is not an inheritable right. So therefore the Gemara says like this, what's the case over here? If we're talking about a case where Rachel died, so then there's no ksuva. There's no ksuva. Mi is like ksuva. Ve'ela, the Gemara says, yeah, fine. There's so much to do over here, but okay. The Gemara says, good. Mi is like ksuva. Ve'ela, shemes hu. So it must be that he died, that Reuven died. But if Reuven died, amai machzeres lo asashar. If Reuven died, right, then why should Rachel, at least according to Rabbi Yehuda, why should Rachel have to return any of the kesef kiddushin money? After all, let her say, Neima, the Gemara says, Neima tnuli baili ve'esmach imo. Let her say, I'm ready to get married. I'm not the problem over here. Give me a husband and I'm ready to get married. Why should she have to return anything? Ve'elo. So I'll say, rather, what's the case? This is fascinating. Ve'elo, be'ishes yisrael shezinsa. Okay? Wasn't expecting that one, right? So rather, we'll say, so what happened? Rather, what are you talking about over here? Right? Reuven's married to Rachel. They did Erisin, and then she had an extramarital affair. So remember again, I will say, once there is Erisin, as much as Halacha Lamaisa, they are not yet allowed to live together until after Nisuin, they are considered to be like a married couple. And therefore, if Rachel has relations with any other man, that is adultery. That is adultery. So maybe we're talking about over here, and obviously again, once a woman commits adultery, she is asura lebal and leboel. She's prohibited both to her husband as well as to the adulterer. So maybe we're talking about over here a case of where Reuven and Rachel did Erisin, and then Rachel committed adultery. So the Gemara says, okay, well, what are we talking about over here? Ubemai, ibaratzin, if she mamish committed adultery, mi is like ksuva, then why would she be entitled to a ksuva? I was supposed to say, just right. In other words, one of the penalties of adultery is that Allah she forfeits a ksuva. So why would she be entitled to a ksuva? So the Gemara says, rather, mi is like ksuva ve'ela ba'ones. It must be no. It wasn't a case of adultery. It's Rahman al-Tzan, Rachel was violated. So the Gemara says, but if she was violated, mishra sharilei. Then again, I would say, if she's violated, there's no halachic impact on her marriage. In other words, that if a woman is chas v'shalom violated, she's permitted to her husband. What's the shayla? In other words, what's the question over here? Ve'ela, rather, it must be a case be'eshes kohen shene'ensa. It must be the case of the wife of a kohen, because we must say the halacha is that if the wife of a kohen is violated, she becomes prohibited to him. A kohen is obviously governed by a different set of halachos. So whereas a wife of a Yisrael, if she's violated, she remains permitted to him. A wife of a kohen, if she's violated, is prohibited to him. So it must be the case of where Reuven is a kohen, and now again they did Erisin, and Rachel was violated. So at this point, Nisuin can no longer happen. He's going to have to go ahead and divorce her. He's going to have to give her a get. So then you have that three machlokes about what happens with the ksuva and the kesef kiddushin. What's the Gemara says? Ubi kiddushin tibuan nitnu kamiflagi. And we'll say, what's the machlokes? So what is the three machlokes between Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yossi? The three machlokes is kiddushin considered to be a sunk cost or not? Here we go. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yossi. So we'll say, I'm sorry. So, good. Rabbi Meir savar, kiddushin l'tibuin nitnu. So Rabbi Meir holds that halacha l'maaseh kiddushin is a sunk cost. So therefore, he holds in this case, right? So Rachel is going to keep her kesef kiddushin, and also he's going to have to pay her out the ksuva. So Rachel at least makes out well financially, or she gets the full kikar, right? Because remember again, this is the case where he was mekadesh with 2,500 zuz, a kikar of silver. So she keeps the kesef kiddushin, and she also gets her ksuva. Rabbi Huda, because again Rabbi Meir holds that kiddushin is a sunk cost. Rabbi Huda savar lav litibuenit. Rabbi Huda says no, kiddushin is not a sunk cost. And therefore, again, therefore she is obligated. She'll get a ksuva, but she has to refund. She has to refund the kesef kiddushin, or probably the way it would work, says Rabbi Yossi, is she'll refund the kesef kiddushin minus the value of the ksuva. What about Rabbi Yossi? Rabbi Yossi wasn't sure. He did not know what to do with this case. Misap kilei ilitibun nitnu ilav. So he didn't know whether or not is kiddushin a sunk cost, is kiddushin not a sunk cost. V'hilchach kidsha be'esrim no sin la shloshim chatzon. Kidsha be'shloshim no sin la esrim chatzon. So Rabbi Yossi himself was not exactly sure what to do, and therefore essentially what he does is he kind of splits the difference. If you take a look at the Rashbam is in the wide lines, about 5 lines. Rabbi Yossi misapkele v'havi kiddushin maman hamutel b'safek. Therefore, again, I will say, according to Rabbi Yossi, the kesef kiddushin is maman hamutel b'safek. We don't know what to do with it. Is it a sunk cost? Is it not a sunk cost? And I will say, we know in general, what do you do with maman hamutel b'safek? What do you do with it? Cholkin. You split it. You split it v'cholkin. Therefore, the Rashbam says, umachzeres lo esachatzi, o chosheves b'ksuva. So the tichof mimena mosak ksuva. Suppose essentially Rabbi Huda says you split the kesef kiddushin. That's essentially what happens. Split it in half. And again, obviously, I will say everything about this also is leverage. So remember, all 3 of these opinions, obviously, everyone agrees she gets a ksuva. Because we're talking about a case now where she forfeited the ksuva. This is the wife of the Kohen who was violated. So she's entitled to her ksuva. So the shaila just is, so every payment that is given are going to leverage the kesef kiddushin versus the ksuva. So again, therefore our 3 machlok cases, Rabbi Meir holds, kesef kiddushin l'tibur nitnu. Kesef kiddushin is a sunk cost. Therefore, according to Rabbi Meir, she's going to keep the kiddushin plus ksuva. Rabbi Yehuda holds kiddushin is not a sunk cost; it is a refundable deposit, and therefore, should marriage not progress, she is obligated to return the kesef kiddushin. So he says she gets her ksuva, but she keeps kesef kiddushin. Rabbi Yossi says, I don't know. It's a safek, and therefore, maman hamutel b'safek cholkin. Therefore, she'll get her ksuva, and she gets to keep half of the kesef kiddushin. Incredible. So the Gemara says as follows. Good. Am Rav Yosef, Am Yomi, Am Rav Nachman. B'chol makom shenagu lahachzir machzirin. So Rav Nachman said, right name Rav Nachman, they will say the halacha is any place where you normally return these items. The halacha is ultimately follow minhag makom. By the way, so if you look at the Rashbam, fine. So if the Rashbam actually frames this case, it's actually interesting. He says Rashbam is 5 lines up at the bottom. Am Rav Yosef, Am Yomi, Am Rav Nachman. B'chol makom shenagu lahachzir machzirin. Hecha demesa isha. So this is interesting, Abba saying. The Yimar seemed to take a little bit of a turn. You see, the way we kind of ended off over here was as follows, right? If we stop here, if we pause here for just a moment, what are we left with? We're left with is, if marriage doesn't progress from Erusin to Nisuin, is there an obligation for the woman to return kesef kiddushin? So what's the answer? It depends. What does it depend on? How you view kesef kiddushin. Is kesef kiddushin a sunk cost, non-refundable deposit, or is it a non-sunk cost, a refundable deposit? So that's machlokes. Sivlonos, what about wedding gifts in general? That seems to be based on minhag hamakom, right? That's going to be based on local custom. Now, interestingly enough, Rav Nachman is dealing with the case of what happens if Rachel died. So we'll say, so now Rachel died. So now, again, I understand if Rachel's alive. If you say that kiddushin is a non-refundable deposit, then okay, then it belongs to her. What if Rachel died? So now we'll say, in other words, would you still say that perhaps it's a inheritable, non-refundable deposit, or maybe does the math change if she's the one who dies? So here we go. So the Gemara says, Rav Nachman says, "B'chol makom shenagu lahachzir machzirin." That's based. That then becomes minhag hamakom. When she dies, that's based on minhag hamakom. V'tirgamar narda, and that's what they did in narda. Narda was based on minhag hamakom. Shar bavel mai. What about in the rest of bavel? Rabbi Rayosi Tabayu Mohare Hadri Kiddusha Hadri. What they used to do in the rest of Bava, as Rabbi say, wedding gifts were returned. Kesef Kiddushin was not returned. So that it seems to me the prevailing custom was a woman keeps kesef kiddushin, but all other gifts given over the course of Erusin are returned back. Papa says, Hilchasa, Ben Shemesu, Ben Shemesehi. I'm sorry. Hilchasa, Ben Shemesu, Ben Shemesehi, Vahadr Behu, Moare Hadri, Kiddushe Lo Hadri. So also Papa says the halacha is whether he died, whether she died, or whether again he went ahead and decided not to go forward. The halacha is Moare Hadri, gifts are returned. Kesef Kiddushin is not returned. So also I say, if you notice, by the way, the Lashon Hara is very interesting. Whether he died, whether she died, or whether he decided he did not want to go through with the marriage, gifts are returned, she keeps Kesef Kiddushin. However, Hadra Ba'i, Afilu Kiddushin Nami Hadri. But if she decides that she does not want to go ahead and go forward with the marriage, then what? Then not only are gifts returned, but also she returns Kesef Kiddushin. Meir says no. Kiddushin lo hadri. Meir says under all circumstances, kesef kiddushin is never returned. Right? So whatever she receives for kiddushin, ultimately again she keeps. And by the way, it doesn't matter. He dies, she dies. He doesn't want to go forward, she doesn't want to go forward. Meir says we never return kesef kiddushin. Now watch this for a very interesting reason. What are we concerned about? Gezer Shem Yomru kiddushin tovos ba'achosa. Okay. So this is fascinating. This is absolutely fascinating. So watch this. What are we concerned about? So you must say, if you return kesef kiddushin, what does it look like? Right? Think about it. It's just right. So let's play this out. Right? Reuven was mekadesh Rachel, gave her kesef kiddushin. Baruch Hashem rat mikudesh asli bekikra zu. It's beautiful, a very very beautiful ring, expensive ring, gives her kiddushin. Okay. Now what happens? He decides, she decides. Doesn't make a difference. That they're not moving forward. So Meir says like this. If she gives back the ring, what does it look like? To the outsider, what does it look like? Right? Maybe the whole thing was a mekachtos. Right? Maybe he found out, I don't know, she found out about him that he's a mamzer. Ooh, all right. Right. That went south quickly. Right? Good, right? Right, he's a mamzer. Right? A genealogical one. Right? A genealogical one. Right? So if he's a mamzer. So we'll say, so now, interestingly enough, let's say it turns out that halacha, so therefore, Reuven's not going to marry Rachel, but Rachel has a really nice sister, Leah. All right, so leaving the fact that the chasana is going to be super awkward, right? But let's say again, is he allowed to marry Leah? If it's mekachtos, yes. But I will say, here's the problem. This is not mekachtos. What is this? Remember again, when Reuven's going to have to give her a get. So the problem just is, same way you're not allowed to marry your wife's sister when you're married to your wife, you're also not allowed to marry your ex-wife's sister. The concern is that if Rachel gives back the kesef kiddushin, it looks like it was a mekachtos, and people may think that Reuven can marry Rachel's sister, when in fact he's not allowed to marry Rachel's sister, because that is the sister of his ex-wife. That's where, therefore again, Meir says, Rachel always keeps the kesef kiddushin. That never reverts back, because we are just too concerned that people are just going to get confused about what happened over here. In fact, the Gemara asked the Gemara, I don't understand. So the Gemara said, Rashi Amar, Gita mochiach ala, but there's a get. There's a get. In other words, this is not just giving her back the ring in Shalom, so there's a get. There's a get. So this is very interesting. V'had Ravashi bedusihi. Ravashi is mistaken. Why? Di'ika de shama baha v'lo shama baha. So I will say, you're right, there is a get. But what's the issue? Some people only hear about the return of the ring, and they will not hear about the get. So they will say, what we're concerned about is, people may not have a full picture. So because of that, we are very concerned with people walking away with a mistaken notion that this was a mekachtos, and some way, somehow down the line, allowing relatives or the ex-relatives to marry each other, which could be genealogically problematic. I want to point out something very interesting. This, if you think about it, is a tremendous chumrah. Why? Because if there's one thing we assume that a get has, it's what? A kol. Right? That's the chap with a get, right? A get has eidos, b'fainechtam, all these different things. But you see, Abba say, when it comes to matters of genealogy, we are incredibly machmir. Right? The entirety of Klal Yisrael is based on the ability to maintain a certain level of, a heightened level of genealogical intactness and purity. So whenever there's a concern that something may corrupt that, we have to be machmir. So therefore, Meir says, never give back kesef kiddushin, just keep it. Just keep it. He dies, she dies, he reneges, she reneges, doesn't matter. just keep it, because we're concerned that if you give it back, it looks like mekachtos, and mekachtos, people may think that they can marry ex-relatives when in fact they cannot. So we'll say, how do we pass halacha l'maaseh? Here we go. The Rambam says, it's very exciting. In Hilchos Zichim Hatana, Perek Vav Halacha Yud Ches, Hamekadesh Es Ha'isha, Man betrothed woman, Afilu Kitcha be'elach dinar, even if he gave her an exorbitant, remember again, Kesef Kiddushin, how much do you need for Kesef Kiddushin? A pruta. So again, Ruvain's obviously trying to do something very beautiful. He gives her a lot, right, a big ring, right, a large ring, a very expensive ring. So what's the halacha? Bein shechazrehi, bein shechazrehu. Whether he reneged, doesn't want to go through with the marriage, or she doesn't want to go through with the marriage, bein shemesu, bein shemesihi. Whether he died or she died, ein hakidushin chozrin liolam, ela harehin matana gimura, she'in len chazara. Pascal halacha l'maisa, kesef kiddushin, sunk cost. Sunk cost. Non-refundable deposits. Right? Sunk cost. That's it. That's what Rambam Paskins, and therefore again, kesef kiddushin never goes back. And I will say why? Because of this concern of Amimar. What about gifts? So what about gifts? So I'll say, so this is very interesting. What about gifts? So shalech sivlonos lebeis chamav, bein merubin bein. Now what I want to point out is something interesting. That does not preclude Rachel from giving it back if she wants to. Like, in other words, if Rachel says, you know what, thank you, I don't need an engagement ring, right? In other words, I don't need the ring, or I don't want it. She can choose to give it back. That's definitely, again, her right to do so. But halacha l'maaseh, if she says, no, I'm going ahead and selling this and taking myself on a trip because you're a jerk, right? Then l'maaseh, she can do that as well. At least halachically, she can do that as well. What about gifts? So just Hashalech Sivlonos Labeis Chamav, Bein Merubin Bein Mu'atin, Bein Shachal Shamsudas Erisina, Osha. So what's the halacha? So we'll say, so now let's say he sent gifts. Bein Shemesu, Bein Shemesihi, Osha Chazer Ba'aish, Yachsura Sivlonos Kulon Chutz Mina Machal Va'amesh. So we'll say, gifts go back. Gifts go back. So gifts are absolutely returned. So again, because we should say, which makes sense, right? See, here's the difference. Kiddushin is framed as a non-refundable deposit. So when you give it, you understand you are not getting this back. Other gifts are given with the expectation of marriage, right? Marriage. So if marriage doesn't materialize, then bepashtos, those other gifts are returned. Okay, so I'll say that is the halacha l'maaseh. Fascinating. So the Gemara says as follows. And I will say, if you think about it, by the way, how beautiful this is, So it turns out that kesef kiddushin is a sunk cost. So I will say, I'll tell you how beautiful it is that, when we put on our tefillin every morning, so what do we say when we go ahead and we wrap it around our fingers? Ve'irastich li li'olam. We refer to our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's interesting, not as nisuin, but rather again as erisin. So I always wondered, why refer to the relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu as erisin, not nisuin, right? Erisin is like, you're not living together. Erisin is this initial stage. I'll say maybe the idea is like this, that what we say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu is, we're kind of like an erisin with you. So the brachos you give us in life, what do we want them to be like? We want them to be like kesef kiddushin. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, I want you to shower me with brachas, but here's the kind of brachas I want. I don't want sivlonos, right? I don't want the kind of gifts that a chassan gives to a kala when they're engaged or after eris and all these things. I want gifts in life like kesef kiddushin. Give me the brachas and make them non-refundable deposits, right? Give me the brachas and make them sunk costs. Give me your love, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but make your love like kesef kiddushin. Never take it away from me. It's incredible. All right, the Gemara goes weiter. Oh, we have a lot to do. What happened over here? All right, let's go. Let's say next. We're good. Let's say, so again, remember, so the next part, I have to give this hakdama because it's fascinating. So the next thing we're going to deal with are shoshvinos. Now, the truth is, I don't know, this is fascinating to me. So these are wedding gifts, but again, not typical wedding gifts. These were gifts, so I'll say, so remember again, what is shoshvinos? So again, Reuven's my friend. So now Reuven's getting married. I give Reuven a gift. When I give Reuven a gift, Rabbi Shmuel, so this concept of shoshvinos says that what? Reuven has a halachic obligation to give me a gift. Right? In other words, that this is not, people get all worked up about like inviting to chasanas, this one invited me to a chasana, I wish it didn't invite me to the chasana, it didn't invite me to the chasana, I invited to my chasana. So I said, forget about like wedding invitation anxiety. This is literally like, if somebody gave you a gift, your friend gave you a gift, you have a halachic obligation to reciprocate that gift. So by the way, so the Rashbam in the Mishnah, explained it as follows. I just want to read to you. He says, Asholech lechabeiro kadiyah. No, where was that? Shoshvinos. Where was this? Ha'achin shazu mixes shoshvinos b'chayav chazor shoshvinos b'chazor shoshvinos nigvis bebezdin. So we'll say. So what does it mean? He says over here, kedin malve aviem kibar. So we'll say. So essentially, what we're going to see is shoshvinos essentially has the status of a loan. So listen to how this is working in halacha. So my friend Reuben is getting married. I know that making a chasana is very expensive. I know that it is. So what am I going to do? I really know that it is, right? So it's very expensive. So what happens? So Reuben's making a chasana. He's my friend. I go over and say, Reuben, here's $500. Now I'm giving that. Now why am I giving that to Reuben? Why am I giving it to Reuben? It's for Reuben to make the chasana. Which is interesting, by the way. It's fascinating. So remember, Reuben is the chasan. But again, remember, we saw this right back in Ksubas. The chasan himself was not like a passive actor in his wedding. It's not just the pshat like he showed up. Chasan was actively involved in the making of his chasana as well. So Reuben's my buddy. Reuben's my friend. He's making a chasana. Making a chasana is expensive. I give him $500. The way halacha and the way the halacha understands that is there's an expectation. I'm helping you with your wedding, and therefore what? When I get married, you're going to help me with my wedding. So to a certain degree, the halacha views this gift as a loan. I'm loaning you the money, use it for your chasana, and then when I get married, you have to reciprocate to me and help me with my wedding as well. That's the concept of shoshvina. So it's a gift, it's a matana, right? But lamaisa, and so what's interesting is that you don't have an obligation per se to necessarily act. In other words, if I choose not to give Reuben the gift, I don't have to give him the gift. Once I give him the gift, it's triggered this process. So now he's received the gift, which is really a quasi-loan. And when I get married, he's obligated to reciprocate. So here we go. So Gemara says, there are 5 things said about shoshvinos. This is so interesting. He says, number 1, nigvis bebezdin. I must say to the point, by the way, that you could bring someone to Bezdin for shoshvinos, right? So again, I give $500 to Reuven, he's getting married. Now my chasana is coming up. Reuven is nowhere to be found. He's not answering his phone, right? I'm getting the automatic reply. I'm out of the office, right? And it's just suddenly I can't get a hold of him, right? He stopped tweeting, he stopped Instagramming, whatever. I can't get a hold of him. So I would say, I could summon him to Bezdin. I can send him to Bezdin to collect the shoshvinos. Next, the chazeres ba'onasa. And we're going to see what this is talking about over here. That halacha l'maisa, when is Reuven obligated to go ahead and give me the shoshvinos? Only when I'm getting married. In other words, you're both say, if I say to Reuven, I'm dating someone seriously, right? So that I can't get shoshvinos. Shoshvinos only comes when I'm actually getting married. That's chazer ba'onasa. Ve'in b'mishum ribis. Interesting. There's no interest. So let's say again, I gave Reuven $500, and Reuven, Baruch Hashem, is in a better financial spot than I am, and he wants to give me $1,000. There's no ribis on it. Amud Beis, ve'ein hashvias misham tasa. Shmita doesn't cancel shoshvinos, which is fascinating, right? Because again, I will say, remember, based on what we're saying, that this makes us, it's a debt. It really is a loan. Shmita doesn't cancel it. Okay, ve'ein bachar notal ba b'shnayim. And the Bechar's double portion does not devolve upon shoshvinos. All right, so now let's analyze each of these. Nigbis bebezdin by taimo. So shoshvinos can be collected in bezdin. Why is that? The Gemara says by taimo kimil v'damya, because it's like a loan. Literally, like we said, about it's fasting. So again, my whole life, up until we got into Basra, they're thinking that shoshvinos is a gift. It turns out that it's not a gift, it really is a loan. Therefore, it's collectible in Beis. Ve'ema mishum ribis, and there is no ribis attached to it. Why? Delav adaita dahachi yoevla. Now, I will say this is interesting because it is not with that intention that ultimately, again, it's given. Now, here's the interesting part about shoshvinos. Shoshvinos says that if I give Reuben a wedding gift, he is obligated to reciprocate. But the halacha does not dictate what? How much. In other words, he could give more, he could give less. So that's the nature of Shoshvinos. Shoshvinos is, so whereas a typical loan, where Ribbis applies, is like this. I give you $500, you're obligated to give me back $1,000. That's Ribbis. But the nature of the Shoshvinos loan essentially says, I gave you money when you were getting married to help with the chasana, you're going to give me back money. How much? All right, that's up to you. More, less, therefore not subject to Ribbis. Next, Shemitah doesn't cancel it. Why? The lo karina be lo yigos. So Rabbi said, this is very interesting. Shemitah only cancels a debt that is collectible now. Right? Because the Torah says you cannot go ahead and force someone to repay you, which indicates to us that halacha l'maisa, if I can't force payment because payment is not due now, then halacha l'maisa Shemitah doesn't cancel the debt. So we're talking about a Shoshvinos. So Reuven got married now. Now it's the Shemitah year. Maybe I'm dating someone, maybe I'm not dating someone, right? So l'maisa again, but there's no obligation right now. So because it's fascinating, which again opens up a different door in general about how Shemitah works. So what does that mean? Any debt not due during a Shemitah year is not canceled by Shemitah. Okay, so that's we're not going to delve into that discussion right now. But so if you look at the Rashbam says the idea over here is, that's why the Rashbam says, Shemitah only cancels a debt if the debt is due now. In other words, if I would be collecting it now, Shemitah says you can't collect it. But if a debt is not due till sometime later on, Shemitah does not go ahead and cancel that debt. Now, the actual way that Shemitah works is a little bit different, but not for now. But the idea of is because this Shoshvinos is not collectible now, therefore Shemitah doesn't cancel. A Bachor doesn't get Pishnayim in this. Why? So we'll say this we know. A Bachor only gets Pishnayim in what? He only gets Pishnayim in actual, not that which is due to the estate. So Shoshvinos is not considered to be collected and actually owned. Rather, it's only considered to be owed, and therefore halacha l'maaseh Bechor doesn't get pishnayim. Okay, so we'll say so that's Shoshvinos. Now let's delve into a little bit more. Rav Kana, klal de Shoshvinos. So we'll say, listen to this. Here is how Shoshvinos works. Now, what we're going to see, we'll say, is as much as there is not a requirement for financial reciprocity, there is an obligation for what we'll call circumstantial reciprocity. Right? So what does that mean? Watch this. Hava b'masa, ibayle l'mesa. So we'll say, so now listen to this. So now Reuven's getting married. So now let's work it backwards, right? So let's say in this case over here, I got married first. Reuven gave me shoshvinos. He gave me $500. So now I hear that Reuven's getting married. I'm obligated to give him shoshvinos. So the Gemara says as follows. So, right, hava b'masa, ibayle l'mesa. So if I hear, right, so look at the Rashbam. Hava b'masa, osa sha'alav la'aksir shoshvinos, hava be'ir kishinasa shoshvina isha, v'lo ba l'samchaso. So ultimately, again, I hear that Reuven's getting married, and he's getting married in Baltimore, he's getting married in the city. So again, I have an obligation to come to the chasana and to give him his shoshvinos. And if I don't come, Reuven could bring me to Beis Din. Okay? Shama called tabla, ibayle l'mesa. So let's say again, I hear the bell. Apparently they used to ring a bell when there was a chasana. Right? So what happens? So now I heard the bell ringing. I have an obligation to go ahead and come to the chasana to go ahead and give Reuven the shoshvinos. So what you see from here is as follows. That the obligation for shoshvinos, because it's a debt, so it's not the pshat, well, I never got an invitation. Right? If I hear that the chasana is happening, I have an obligation to show up and pay the shoshvinos. So I hear that it's happening in the city. I hear the bell. I have an obligation to come. And again, in parentheses, if I don't show up, then Reuven has a right to bring me to Beis Din. Lo shama kol tavla, ibayle leduye. Right? But again, if I didn't hear the bell, and I wasn't in the city, right? So then what's the halacha? Then Reuven has an obligation to tell me that he's getting married. Right? In other words, you don't know what you don't know. So if I don't know that Reuven's getting married, I can't have an obligation to show up and give shoshvinos. And I will say, and if ultimately again I don't show up because I didn't know, the most that Reuven could do is be braigis with me, right? It's like Tarum Saleh. He could be braigis with me. Okay, what do you want? If I don't know that you're getting married, I don't know what I don't know. Okay, so the Gemara says Tarumas is like shloim mishalim. Ultimately, again, he can be braigis with me, but I still have an obligation. Ultimately, again, to go ahead and pay the shoshvinos, because Rabbi said the shoshvinos is a debt. Viat kama. So also the Gemara says. So up until how much? Now what does this mean? Ad kama? Rashi says the havadai tzarach lenachos me'achilas shrecho. So let's watch this. So typical shashvinos is I go to a chasana, right, and I give my friend a gift. Well, in these cases over here, I missed the chasana. Now, why did I miss the chasana? I didn't know about it, right? If I knew about it, right, I heard about it, but I didn't go. Or if the bell was ringing and I didn't go, it's okay, I still have to give the full shashvinos. What happens if I did not know about the chasana? Shabbos says, now watch this. If I didn't know about the chasana, that means I missed out on what? What did I miss out on? The shmorg, right? I missed the shmorg. So because I missed the shmorg, therefore I have a right to deduct some money from my wedding gift. Now I will say, by the way, you do see people like this at a wedding, right? Where just based on sheer volume of consumption, you're thinking to yourself, you better be giving a very big gift, right? But Lamaisa, you're like, because of you, they only put out small plates, right? So nice again. So therefore, again, the Gemara says like this. So the Gemara says that halacha l'maisa, if you don't end up actually participating in the wedding, how much are you permitted to deduct from your shashvinos? So the Gemara says, it depends. Here we go. So the Gemara says, Nagu b'nei ginona ad zuza. So we'll say, so the Gemara says, ad zuza aisi b'kaveh, achli b'kreisei. The assumption is, we'll say, that a person eats at least a zuz worth of food. That's what the assumption is. So therefore, again, if you're giving a gift of a zuz, it's even. Like you've covered your costs. You've covered your costs. Therefore, again, we'll say, so what that means is that for the groomsmen, if you're not showing up at the chasana, right, which means the close friends of the chasana, you are permitted to deduct up to a zuz from your gift. Okay? Ad arba mishalim pal. If you were giving a larger gift, right? If you were giving a larger gift, and therefore you're giving 4 zuz, you could deduct half of your gift. Now, both saying, now here's what's fascinating about this. This is incredible. Take a look at the Rashbam for just a moment. Ad arba in this chayib dalad zuzim mishoshvini. So, right, if you were giving 4 zuz as your shoshvinos, mishalim palga. The chayban de maybe dalad regilim lahachilo berevach ad shnei zuzim. The chayban de lo achal yafchos shnei min adalad. So we'll say this is absolutely fascinating, and it is fascinating to contemplate how chasanas worked. I will say, depending on the size of the gift, determined what you got served at the chasana, right? So I'll say, so first of all, no etiquette of like just getting the envelope and like putting it in your jacket pocket. You got the envelope, and what did you do? You opened that puppy up, right? In other words, we're looking at that right over there. Okay, very nice. Here, why don't you come sit over here? Right, huh? Kids table for you, right? So that's again, it's fascinating to contemplate, like societally, like just how this worked. But that's how it worked. I will say, by the way, there's actually a real beauty to it. Like, I will say that literally everybody is helping each other make their simchas. That's the way it works. Like, it's not just like a nice formality of a gift. Like, literally, you help me make my simchas, I'll help you make your simchas, and that's how we're going to structure it. So therefore, again, the Gemara says, if you were giving a larger gift, that also meant that you were getting better food. Which then meant if you did not come to the chasana, you could deduct more off your gift corresponding to the higher quality food that you would have received. So arba mishalim palga mikan ve'elech inshi kachashivuse. So we'll say after that, halacha l'maisa again, you just deduct based on the size of the gift that you're giving and based on the type of food that you're doing. So we'll say, but the idea over here is, say if halacha l'maisa, you had the ability to go to the wedding, but you didn't do so you still have to give the regular gift that you're going to give. But halacha l'maisa, if you couldn't go to the wedding, or for whatever reason they're precluded from going so, you give the shoshvinos minus the food you would have consumed. How do you determine the food you would have consumed? That is directly proportional to the size of the gift that you would have given. Tarabanan. Asima plumbi. I was, to do one more line. So we'll say, this is where we spoke about the idea. We'll have to stop with this, but this is where we spoke about the idea that even though there may not be financial reciprocity, there is absolutely circumstantial reciprocity. In other words, so when I have an obligation, right? So I went to Ruben's wedding, and the wedding was a certain type. Ruben only has an obligation to give me back shoshvinos if my wedding resembles his wedding. Again, that's the circumstantial reciprocity. Do not get nervous. We are totally on target. We're fine. In about a week and a half from now, the dot can get short. Right? We're good. What a way to start the Yahrzeit. Shkoyach. All right, Chaim Razum, have a great day, everyone.
The tab is short anyway.